Okay, I just saw a video um from a Jewish guy, Johnathan Kahn, who has a lot of really informative materials. He talks about the deeper secrets of what's going on in modern times spiritually in regards to the economic downturns and worse disasters on holy days and national holidays that have been intensifying during the Shemitah years throughout all of America's history. And he also has a book called The Return of the Gods, where he talks about Ishtar and the whole timing, the real world timing of events related to Ishtar in America's culture, and how, with the gender bending, the drug and alcohol culture, the breakdown of the family, the fading away of marriage, porn addiction, and all that stuff associated with the timing of events related to Ishtar in America, who's said to ride a lion. And something that he said really stood out to me. He said that in the ancient Sumerian writings, it says when the head of a lion appears, Ishtar is making war on you. So, and that's really kind of interesting. So, if you're a person who was born for the purpose of humanitarianism, if you're a person who was born for a calling that you may or may not be aware of right now, uh, yeah, you might have multiple dreams, not multiple visions, no, but multiple dreams where there's an open window or an open door. No, let me change that. Dreams and visions, I'm sorry, where there's an open window or an open door, and there's the head of a lion who's looking to just casually walk right in. Um, and when Ishtar makes war on you, it can look like you know, I I just think if you're a person who falls into the demographic of being targeted by that sort of thing at all levels of society, one or more times throughout your life, it would benefit you, I believe, to watch Johnathan Kahn's video on the subject of, I think the video on YouTube, the title is The Enchantress Possessing America, where he talks about Ishtar, the gender bending and the drug and alcohol culture and the porn, and how all of it's connected with the timing of specific events. I think you should watch that because there's some key things that's really, really gonna stand out to you a lot if you've been targeted multiple times by LGBTQ biological male ringleaders who are in the Church of Satan and also in paganism and also in the church. If you've been targeted multiple times by this, certain things are going to stand out to you in what Johnathan Kahn's saying. And I haven't read his book yet, but I would like to read it at some point, because when you get targeted for stuff like that, a lot of times you cannot call police. A lot of times you cannot get help from local police. A lot of times you cannot get help from the FBI. A lot of times church prophets, they will not speak to you. and their church members will not give them your message. Um, when you get targeted multiple times by the ringleaders involved with the whole Ishtar thing, if you cannot, any government oversight board over businesses, medical facilities, government offices, any of that, you're just not going to get a response. And if you do get a response, it's going to be a dismissive one and possibly one that threatens you with no attempt to hide it, because they know that no one's going to believe you, and those who do believe, they're not going to care. A lot of times you just get ignored. There's no breakthrough. There's no resolution of the deepest issues. And, if you've been targeted by that sort of thing one or multiple times, if you know, and if you have sons, your sons are as good as gone. They're going to come up with every excuse under the sun to keep them in foster care with all different kind of people, whether it's family or non-family, whether they're your race or another race. They'll have people of your race raping your sons. They'll have white people raping your sons in foster care, gay raping them and molesting them. They'll have grown women doing it. It don't matter if it's your race, a different race, your relatives, a non-family. They gonna have both races and both genders raping your sons as soon as they old enough to walk, if you're targeted for this kind of thing. And so yeah, the head of a lion appears when Ishtar's making war on you, like Johnathan Kahn says. That's actually true. His tutorial actually really helped me to connect the dots on some things related to the ancient Sumerian cult. And what I think is kind of interesting is it's not solely just Ishtar who rides a lion. The Canaanite goddess Ashera, she rides a lion. Durga of Hinduism, she rides a lion. And what I've noticed with on the Hinduism side, what I've noticed is, like, in one lesson on the Bhagavad Gita with the American Vedanta Institute, when I was listening to one of those lessons, the guy who was teaching the class, he was talking about the 16,000 wives of Lord Shiva, committed to giving him some inbred, sickly kids with a shortened lifespan. But that's another story for another day. So he was talking about the 16,000 wives of Lord Shiva committed to giving shorter lifespan, highly infertile inbred kids. And when he was talking about that, he was saying that Sita, the wife of Lord Rama, he was saying that she was a symbol of ego and selfishness and narcissism because she was not in a harem and she did not have a co-wife. And, he was basically saying that Sita deserved to be discarded by her husband, who was her rescuer and her hero, because she did not have a co-wife and she was not in a harem. And I was thinking to myself, like, we're in the 6th great mass extinction on our planet. Weather patterns are destabilizing so bad to the point where in June, you had a heavy blizzard in Mexico, but also manatees dying in water from heat stress just a few miles to the east of there in Florida, all in the same month now, the same month. Not that, 2 locations not that far apart. Like, the weather destabilization, it's getting really, really bad. People have driven like more than half the plant and animal species on this planet to the point of extinction. And I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, dude, do we really need to be hearing about the 16,000 wives of Lord Krishna and hearing nothing about the shorter lifespans, high infertility, and sometimes lower IQ, sometimes as well, and sickliness, born from that kind of lifestyle. I'm like, do we really need to be reinforcing that? And I thought it was kind of interesting that this is the focus for Hinduism, and even the gay culture of Catholicism. It goes towards that. It goes together with the dysfunctional teachings from Hinduism and Islam and multiple cultures that preach the mandatory polygamy narrative. Basically trying to kill off the men who are less of a problem genetically and make the ones who's at the root of most of the issues the only option. I've noticed that the culture of doing that, it kind of fits with the gay culture of the Catholic priests who have gone into error, and it fits with the LGBTQ community and the whole Ishtar thing. All of it kind of goes together like a hand in a glove. And although I feel blessed enough to be aware of Johnathan Kahn's input to go together with some things that I've picked up on for myself, one thing I noticed is that with him and with their African and pagan and Catholic and Christian partners in crime, what I'm noticing is, why is it that they can talk about everything except the role of race and politics in these ancient cults and ancient powers that are still very active in the world today on a level that a lot of people don't believe because they're not really making the effort to be fully informed? Why is it that these people are talking about everything except the role of race and politics in the Ishtar making war, and how the all races are brought against you when Ishtar's making war, but a lot of times it's the white community that tends to be on the front lines while doing the dirty work, while the Hindu, the African, the Islamic and Asiatic and other factions, they kind of sit behind that, playing the victim. So with that said, what's the real way out? What's the real exit point? What's the real point of salvation when that Ishtar faction that has the church and Islam and the African deities and all these different powers behind it, what's the real exit point? What's the real way out when Ishtar wants to make war on you? What's the real way out when the white community and the LGBTQ community on the front lines, it has so much security and safety at this point that they can admit in writing to what they're doing to you, what they want to do to you, what they plan to do to you. They just admit it. They ain't even put it in writing, and nobody fucking cares. Nobody responds. Church not gonna respond. All these different people from these different factions, a lot of times they ain't gonna say shit. There's nobody to call for help a lot of times. So with that said, what's the real way out from the dysfunction and the ignorance, the aggression and the war? What's the real way out from these factions destroying your life, kidnapping your children, especially if they're boys, to make sure that they stay out of your custody, getting raped and molested by both races? What's the real way out from all this shit. Because I don't know. Like the church and the rabbis, they say that they're offering the way out from having your life torn apart by people from those types of factions, from having your relationships torn apart, from your finances, your children. They say they offer a point of salvation from all of that, but when I see it in action on the ground in real life, and when I've seen it over and over and over again, I don't see a real way out from this programming, this assault coming from the rabbis or the churches or the pagans. I don't see it. So, what is the real option for people who do have Ishtar making war on us? What is the real way out? What is the real path to being removed from that, being attacked and having our children rescued and living in a safe space? What is the real actual path to that? Because given what I know about how it plays out in real life, I'm not seeing the path of salvation from the rabbis. I'm not seeing the path of salvation from the church. I'm not seeing it from the pagans. I see all these different spiritual and religious factions sitting back waiting to cash in big, while the white community and the LGBTQ community of all races is on the front lines waging that war in the church and in the pagan um, circles, and quite possibly within Judaism too. And I see it with Islam, Catholicism. I see it all as one unit working towards one goal that's not profitable for our planet and not profitable for our genetic future. I see this clearly, but what's the real exit ramp? What's the real way out from all that swirling, dysfunctional, chaotic ball of shit? I don't know. I wish I did know. I I've been researching for about 12, 13 years now. And in my 12, 13 years of research, trying to figure out the real reasons why we don't see miracles on the same level as what Yeshua did it, it's brought me to this. It's brought me to this question and a whole slew of additional new questions that I don't fully and completely have the answer to. I had unshakable faith, unshakable, unquestionable faith, but now, given what I know and given what I see, my faith is questioned. It's a bit shaken, but not to the point that I'm going to jump into the arms of some religion that sold the African part of my ancestry in exchange for some liquor and trinkets. And again, and also cursed the African part of the bloodlines that live here. I'm not going to jump into that. I'm not going to jump into the same indigenous culture that also sacrificed women and children as well and did the drug and alcohol culture. Even with the non Abrahamic side, I can see that culture of human sacrifice, drugs, and alcohol on the African side. I mean, selling women and kids into slavery in exchange for alcohol and tobacco. That's a form of Ishtar making war on you. Very much. And then they step in later to say, oh, you're not black if you're not in one of these African based religions. You're not, and even on the Native American side, the drinking, drugging, and group sex rituals that kept coming back into play over and over again in the Bible. That was a big part of Native culture, where they'd drink, drug, have group sex, and cut the heart out of a virgin, or they'd mass murder a bunch of young girls and little kids as offerings to their sun god. Whether they would worship their sun god in male or female form. And I noticed in a lot of cultures all over the world, their most high god is someone who always requires the death of a human or an animal. And most of the time, it's women and kids in multiple cultures. Other times, they could say, oh, it can just be any adult or an animal. And I just see these continuous patterns. And it makes me wonder, okay, well, the cult of drinking, drugging, and human sacrifice that kept resurfacing repeated in Israel. And that was a very big foundational part of multiple cultures all over the world. This Ishtar thing, who might also be the same as Canaanite Ashera and Hindu Durga. Okay, this thing. What I'm wondering is, did it continue resurfacing in the culture of Israel over and over and over again because it's what the Hebrew God wanted? Is this why it kept coming back? Because secretly that's what the Spirit wanted. Because if you can part the Red Sea, heal the sick, give the blind sight, and raise the dead to life, I'm pretty sure that you can keep the priests in your temples from returning to that kind of culture with everybody else. I know it can be done. So the question is, did the Hebrew God want the repeated return to this culture that's pretty much touched every culture on this planet? The whole Ishtar thing. Or is it a situation where the male counterpart is the one that wanted this, and that's why it keeps coming back? Is it a situation where it wasn't both of them that wanted this? Is it a situation where it was only just one that wanted it, and because one wanted it, that's why it kept coming back? That's why the people kept being invaded and torn apart. And I know in Hindu culture, when they have two deities, they'll put the female deity's name first and the male deity's name last. And what I know is that with the forbidden name of God, that rabbis in Israel are going to speak today in rituals on Yom Kippur while wearing all white. I know that forbidden name that they're going to speak today. The first half of it is a female name, and I know specifically what that female name is. I was spelling it wrong before in the past, but I know how to spell it right now and pronounce it right now, even though I did it wrong in the past. And just like in the Hindu culture where they put the female name first and the male name last, I noticed with the forbidden name of the Hebrew God that's going to be spoken on today, the first half of it, that is a female name. So what I'm wondering is, this whole ugly mess that kept returning to Israel over and over again, this ugly mess that has touched almost every culture on the whole planet, is it because her male counterpart wanted it and he put her in a box? Like the mother of Yeshua, she lived in pretty much in poverty her whole life and was pretty much disregarded. She's only looked at as just a womb that pushed somebody out, and then beyond that, ignored. So with that said, what's the real story that no one has? The real darker story on these African slave masters who mass murdered more than 700 Ethiopians at the start of 2021 to get the Ark of the Covenant that rabbis have right now to begin the interfaith movement that Hopi Native Americans and reservation Indians and Catholics and Islamists and pagans, this whole interfaith thing that all these different cultures are waiting to cash in on, including the rabbis. It started with the mass murder of more than 700 unarmed Ethiopians at the start of 2021 to get the Ark. So, what's the real story here of Ishtar making war on us? And what's the real way out? Does any culture have any information to highlight the real way out from that assault on self, that assault on our lives, that assault on our kids, that a lot of times we can't get help from any level of society when those LGBTQ biological male ringleaders are making their moves. You know, and like I said, there's been some, they've even told me in writing what they were doing to me and who they're affiliated with, and nobody fucking cared. Nobody. It's always the same types of assaults, whether these guys who are on the front lines, whether they're white LGBTQ biological males, black LGBTQ biological males, Hispanic, Christian, pagan, Satan worshipers, it doesn't matter. Like they could literally do anything and admit it in writing and nobody cares. So where's the real salvation at? Where is it? The church, the rabbis, the pagans, it seems like everybody's on board with this whole thing. So what's the real path to living and being separate from all that shit and not being attacked by that spiritual faction that really does involve all races? You just have some sitting back playing the victim and pretending, just like them Hopi Indians and Kenyan Kikuyus and other factions that had a hand in the death of more than 700 unarmed Ethiopians at the start of 2021 to give the Hebrew Ark of the Covenant to the rabbis who have already signed their agreement with the Islamic Imam fulfilling prophecy. And, you know, his name is 606 in English Gematria. You've got Recep Erdogan. His name, it's 666 in English Gematria. You got all this stuff going down. And so, what is the real path to the Ishtar and not the real path of salvation from being preyed on and having your bloodline, your genetics hijacked? What's the real exit from having your life targeted, torn apart? What's the real exit from being isolated and having the ringleaders on the front lines telling you to your face what they're trying to do to you and your kids? Well, what's the real exit, the real way out from that? Because I wish I knew, and I don't really feel confident that I know. You know, Ishtar, Nana, Ashera, Durga, all these Pachamama, Olokun, all these different things. It's all Islam. It's all the Hopi reservation Indian thing. It's all part of one thing that benefits and serves the polygamist that benefits and serves the people, the families who have been most responsible for the extinction of more than half the plants and animal species on this planet to date. This directly serves the people who have been most responsible for the extreme climate destabilization happening now that got so intense to the point where in June of this year, you had a blizzard with heavy snow in the middle of summer and only a few miles to the west of Mexico in Florida. More than 500 manatees, water animals, dropping dead from heat stress in the water, all in the same fucking month. And this all serves the agenda of the families who are the most responsible for these issues and normally the least willing to limit themselves to fix it. So I'm just wondering, the Hebrew God, the male name that's only the second half of the forbidden name that's going to be spoken today. Has he been fully in support of Ishtar? No, that cult known by many names in different cultures. Has he been secretly in support of that? Has he been secretly making war on types of individuals like myself because he sees us as a threat to his way of life, even though we're not the ones who are wealthy, even though we're not the ones with the money or the power, even though it's normally very, very easy for his people to isolate us, have people pretending to be for us when they're not, as part of the isolation tactics. Even though it's very, very easy it's been so easy for his people to go after us and our kids. Why would him and his people be seeing us as a threat to their way of life when they've burned and assaulted their own to make themselves look like the victims, when they've burned and assaulted their own to start these huge movements to make it even easier for them to prey on those of us who don't have the real power and really, quite honestly, never did? Where's the solution? Where's the relief? Because I don't see it yet.